On the early morning of August 26, 2012, a horrifying scene was discovered at kilometer marker 793 on the Beijing-Tibet Highway, within the jurisdiction of Urad Front Banner, Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region. A charred corpse lay in the middle of a desolate wasteland, bearing clear signs of a gruesome crime. Who was the victim, and what had caused a human being to suffer such a tragic end? When investigators arrived at the scene, they were immediately overwhelmed by the haunting sight. The body of a man had been doused with gasoline and set on fire, burned beyond recognition. The torso had almost completely turned to ash, with only the head, right arm, and feet remaining intact. The acrid smell of burning still lingered in the air, mixing with the desolation of the roadside area. Clearly, this was not a random accident, but a brutal murder, deliberately planned to erase all traces. The forensic team immediately conducted an autopsy. Results showed the victim was a male approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, estimated to be between 18 and 25 years old. Notably, he had not died from the fire. Experts found at least 9 fatal wounds from a hard object repeatedly striking the head area, causing severe cranial trauma and completely deforming the skull. It was these brutal blows that claimed the victim's life, before his body was doused with gasoline and burned. This completely ruled out the possibility of a traffic accident followed by body disposal, confirming this as a cold-blooded crime. The perpetrator had deliberately murdered the victim, then attempted to destroy all evidence by burning the body to cover their tracks. Another important detail was that there were no blood traces at the scene. The body was carefully wrapped in a cotton blanket and tightly bound with steel wire. These signs led police to conclude that where the body was found was not the primary crime scene. It appeared the perpetrator had killed the victim elsewhere, then transported the body here for disposal. The choice of such a remote location, about 6 miles from residential areas and near the foot of Wula Mountain, showed the cold, calculated cruelty of the killer. Faced with this challenging case, the investigation team's most urgent task was to identify the victim. However, the body had no identification documents, and the face had been so destroyed by fire that recognition was impossible. In this desperate situation, police had to rely on the few physical clues remaining at the scene. At the scene, they recovered 2 keys, one bearing the Guli brand commonly used for apartment doors, and another with the Bayodian brand typically used for security doors. Additionally, on the victim's clothing were several metal buttons that hadn't completely burned, still bearing the English logo Jack and Jones. A black plastic bag used to cover the victim's head was also found, with printed text reading, "Protect the environment," and "Protect China's environment." Though limited, these pieces of evidence provided some initial information about the victim and his living circumstances. However, investigators had to acknowledge that these items were quite common in the market. Using them to trace the victim's identity or the perpetrator would be a difficult and time-consuming task. To gather more information, the task force used local media to broadcast missing person alerts with basic identifying characteristics of the victim. However, after some time, the responses about missing persons cases didn't match the characteristics of the body found at the scene. The case seemed to reach a dead end from the very beginning. While everything appeared stalled, investigators began analyzing the perpetrator's behavior in detail. Why had the killer chosen such a disposal site? Though desolate, this was a location along a highway where traffic passed continuously. While not always busy, the chance of discovery was still higher than choosing a truly isolated location. An important hypothesis emerged. Perhaps the perpetrator was not a local, someone from elsewhere who was unfamiliar with the terrain, possibly transporting the body from outside into the Urad Front Banner area for disposal, and randomly choosing a location they thought was sufficiently remote. Police conducted a more detailed analysis of the timing of the crime. Based on autopsy results, the victim's time of death was estimated at around 7 to 8 p.m. on August 25th. Meanwhile, the time the body was set on fire was around 4 to 5 a.m. on August 26th. This meant there was a gap of up to 9 hours between when the victim was murdered and when the body was disposed of. Unexpected information from Beijing-Tibet Highway Traffic Police significantly narrowed the investigation scope. From the night of August 25th until about 1 to 2 a.m. on August 26th, the Beijing-Tibet Highway had very strict traffic inspections at entry and exit points. This meant those transporting the body would have been very cautious and unlikely to transport the body during this time period. Most likely, the perpetrator waited until after 1 to 2 a.m. when the inspections ended before beginning to move. If so, with about 3 to 4 hours of travel time before burning the body at 4 to 5 a.m., the perpetrator's starting range would be significantly narrowed. The investigation focused on major cities east of the Beijing-Tibet Highway within a 3 to 4 hour travel radius, including Baotou, Hohhot, and Ordos. All three cities were large urban areas with hundreds of thousands of residents, making the search for clues still challenging. While investigators were still struggling with the broad investigation scope, a seemingly meaningless detail at the scene suddenly caught their attention. On both sides of the highway near where the body was discovered, 2 chains of cement bricks were found. One chain with 6 bricks and another with 3 bricks, one of which was broken, totaling 9 bricks. Each brick weighed about 4 to 7 pounds, with the total weight of both chains reaching about 44 pounds. What was special was that they were tied together with the same type of steel wire used to bind the victim's body. After consulting with experts, police determined that this type of cement brick was not used on the Beijing-Tibet Highway. This led to an important deduction. These brick chains had definitely been brought to the scene by the perpetrator. But why such heavy bricks? Investigators proposed a bold hypothesis. Most likely, the perpetrator initially intended to sink the body in a river, with these bricks serving as weights to ensure the body would sink deep and never surface. This hypothesis led to another question. If they intended to sink the body, why didn't the perpetrator follow through? Both Hohhot and Ordos were cities where the route to the crime scene would pass the Yellow River or its tributaries. If starting from these 2 cities, the perpetrator could have easily chosen a more convenient location to sink the body underwater, ensuring much more discreet disposal than burning the body by the highway. From this, the task force made a breakthrough deduction. Perhaps the perpetrator had started from a city where the route to the scene had no suitable rivers or lakes for sinking the body. When examining maps, investigators discovered that from Baotou, a major city in Inner Mongolia, traveling west along the Beijing-Tibet Highway to the scene, a distance of over 60 miles, there were no rivers or lakes large enough to carry out body sinking. This hypothesis strongly supported the assessment that Baotou was the most likely starting point for the killer. With the investigation scope narrowed to Baotou City, the task force began analyzing the victim more carefully. Based on physical evidence, this man was 5 feet 9 inches tall, aged 18 to 25. His use of Guli and Baodian brand keys suggested he might have lived in an apartment. The Jack and Jones clothing brand was typically only sold in large shopping malls at relatively high prices, indicating the victim had fairly good economic conditions. Additionally, through examination, the victim's feet were smooth without calluses, showing he was not someone who regularly did heavy manual labor. The cement bricks used for urban landscaping found at the scene also reinforced the likelihood that the victim was a city dweller. In summary, police had built a fairly detailed profile of the victim. A young male, 5 feet 9 inches tall, with good economic conditions, living in an apartment in a major city, and not doing manual labor. With these characteristics, a task force of over 30 members was established to comprehensively review missing person cases in Baotou City. However, after a week of effort, all searches yielded no results. It seemed no one among the missing persons matched the victim's profile. The murder case had reached another dead end. The golden 7-day period for solving the case had passed, but police still hadn't found a breakthrough clue. Pressure increasingly weighed on the investigators' shoulders. At this point, the task force decided to change their approach. If finding missing persons was difficult, why not try to find the perpetrator's vehicle used to transport the body? Although the disposal scene had no surveillance cameras or witnesses, the highway entry and exit points did. Police hoped to find a suspicious vehicle by reviewing video from toll booth cameras. Initially, they hypothesized that the perpetrator's vehicle would have abnormal travel time. longer than usual due to stopping to dispose of the body. However, when they began implementation, investigators realized the difficulty of the task. There were thousands of entry and exit points on the Beijing-Tibet highway, and on the night of the murder, over 20,000 vehicles had passed through this area. Examining each vehicle, determining schedules, vehicle types, and drivers was an enormous workload that seemed nearly impossible. Nevertheless, with extraordinary persistence, after 5 to 6 days of continuously reviewing tens of thousands of video segments, investigators finally discovered a suspicious vehicle. It was a black Toyota sedan. This vehicle had entered the highway from a Bao-2 entrance at 4:06 a.m., and at 5:47 a.m. the same day, it appeared at an exit near Wula Mountain close to the disposal scene. The distance from the Bao-2 entrance to the Wula Mountain exit was only about 60 miles, but this vehicle had taken 1 hour and 41 minutes to travel, about 40 minutes slower than normal driving time. This abnormal travel time had put the vehicle in police crosshairs. The abnormality of the black Toyota sedan didn't stop at travel time. When the vehicle entered the highway from Bao-2, its license plate was still clearly visible as BDA 991. However, when it appeared at the Wula Mountain exit, the license plate had been carefully covered with some kind of cloth. The deliberate concealment of the license plate, combined with the suspiciously extended travel time and passing through the exact area of the disposal scene, made this vehicle the task force's #1 suspect. Police immediately checked information about license plate BDA 991. However, the check results surprised them. This plate actually belonged to an SUV, not a sedan. This confirmed that the black Toyota was using a fake license plate. Although the license plate was fake, the vehicle had entered the highway, and toll booth cameras had recorded clear images of 2 men sitting in the car, a driver and a passenger. Police continued reviewing surveillance cameras along the entire route, and about 30 minutes after leaving the Wula Mountain exit at 6:17 a.m. the same day, the black Toyota sedan reappeared at another highway entrance. This time it bore a different license plate, PH1111. Checking information about license plate PH1111, police determined this was the vehicle's real plate. The vehicle's owner was a woman named Li Menghan. However, through investigation, the person who regularly used this vehicle was her husband, Li Bing. Li Bing was a man originally from Anshan, Liaoning Province, currently running a bathhouse service center in Bao-2. With this information, police quickly found the black Toyota parked near Li Bing's bathhouse in Bao-2. The shape, model, and even small details on the vehicle matched perfectly with the car that had appeared at the scene. All clues pointed to Li Bing. The task force decided to approach Li Bing to clarify the matter. However, when they contacted him, Li Bing was out of town. Police showed Li Bing's family photos of the 2 men in the Toyota from surveillance cameras, and the family confirmed it was not Li Bing. This made the situation more complicated. If Li Bing wasn't the driver, who had used his vehicle on the night of the murder? Over the phone, Li Bing explained that the day before the murder occurred, he had lent the vehicle to an old hometown friend named Zhang Tieqiang. Tieqiang had returned the car to him the following afternoon. Li Bing also mentioned that when he got the car back, he noticed it had been cleaned very thoroughly, both inside and outside. This detail immediately raised police suspicions, as thorough cleaning after borrowing a car seemed like abnormal behavior. Through investigation, police realized Tieqiang was not an unfamiliar name. At that time, he was 39 years old and had married a woman in Bao-2 a few years earlier. Tieqiang had once been a businessman, but later fell into gambling and high-interest lending activities. More alarmingly, Tieqiang was also a suspect in a murder case that occurred in September 2011 in Alksalig, Inner Mongolia. In that case, he and some accomplices had caused one person's death and seriously injured another in a street fight. After that incident, Tieqiang had fled and was being pursued. With this information, all suspicions pointed toward Tieqiang. He had a criminal record, motive to hide crimes, and was using the suspicious vehicle. However, finding Tieqiang wasn't easy either. Li Bing said Tieqiang frequently changed phone numbers and locations. After the Alxa case occurred, his phone number had also been cancelled. Although Li Bing and Tia Chiang were from the same hometown and had a close relationship from over 15 years ago, Li Bing insisted he had no knowledge of Tia Chiang's current whereabouts. Police suspected Li Bing was hiding something. The task force decided to pressure Li Bing. They argued that who would lend a friend a car worth over $30,000 without knowing clearly about that person or their residence? After multiple exchanges, persuasion, and analysis of the troubles he might face if he continued concealing information, Li Bing finally provided an address, a rental house in Baotou, where Tai Chiang and his associates had once lived. With the address in hand, the task force quickly went to the rental house. But when they arrived, the house was empty, everything apparently cleaned out. Police were disappointed but still decided to thoroughly examine every corner of the house. Then in the bathroom, they found a small blood stain on the wall. This blood sample was quickly collected and sent for testing. The test results shocked everyone. This blood belonged to the victim in the highway burning case. The discovery of the victim's blood in Tai Chiang's rental house confirmed one thing. This was indeed the primary crime scene, where the crime had actually occurred. Although the room had been thoroughly cleaned, the small blood stain remaining on the wall had become irrefutable evidence. This strengthened the hypothesis that T. Chiang and his associates were closely connected to the murder and body disposal. The deeper investigators examined, the more unusual details they discovered in the house. On the floor, a layer of dark green paint had been applied. The landlord said this paint was applied by T. Chiang before leaving. This action was also very strange. Why repaint the entire house before returning it? Were they trying to hide something under this paint layer? But what truly amazed investigators beyond belief was when they tried using the two keys found on the victim's body. One key opened the apartment door, and the other opened the security door of this rental house. This perfect match was not just a clue, but a chilling confirmation. Either the victim had a very close relationship with this house, or the perpetrator had deliberately placed the keys on the body to mislead or convey some message. This only increased the mystery and complexity of the case. Tai Chiang, the fugitive, became the #1 suspect. Where he was, and who his accomplices were, became the most urgent questions needing answers. Next, police checked the rental records. The lease contract showed the renter was a young woman named Li Xiaosha, born in 1996, from Xi'an, Shanxi Province. The task force immediately contacted Xi'an police to search for information about Xiaosha. Feedback from Xi'an indicated that Xiaosha had left her hometown to work elsewhere several years ago and had uncertain whereabouts. This was the only clue to find Tia Chiang, so police decided to concentrate all efforts on finding Xiaosha. A search warrant and comprehensive surveillance arrangement for Xiaosha were issued. A few days later, important information was received. A woman using an ID card with Xiaosha's name had accessed the internet at an internet cafe in Wuhai City, Inner Mongolia. The task force immediately traveled to Wuhai and quickly apprehended this woman. However, during interrogation, she claimed she was not Xiaosha, but named Sun Lin. Sun Lin explained that Xiaosha's ID card was given to her by a friend, and she didn't know Xiaosha at all. Police continued investigating and discovered Sun Lin had received this ID card in summer 2011, and a few months later, Ti Chiang's rental house was leased under Xiaosha's name. Could Sun Lin have impersonated Xiaosha to rent the house for Tai Chiang? Faced with police's persistent questioning, Sun Lin finally confessed the truth. She confirmed that in October 2011, she had impersonated Xiaosha to rent the apartment at her boyfriend Wang Dongdong's request. Sun Lin explained that Dongdong and Tai Chiang had a close brotherhood relationship, and both were fugitives who had fled after the Alxa League murder case in September 2011. Along with them was another man named Jiang Bai. It turned out Jiang Bai was the man who had sat in the passenger seat of the black Toyota sedan with Tai Chiang on the night of the body disposal. After the Alxa murder case, all three, Dongdong, Tai Chiang, and Jiang Bai, had to flee. Having criminal records and being wanted, they didn't dare show their faces to rent housing, so they asked Sun Lin to use the fake ID card to rent the apartment. Sun Lin continued explaining that after fleeing with her boyfriend Dong Dong and his associates for over 6 months, she felt this life of hiding had no future. The hopelessness and despair caused her to frequently argue with Dong Dong. About a week before the burning case occurred, on August 17, 2012, after a major argument, Sun Lin decided to leave them, going alone to Wuhai and cutting off all contact, even changing her phone's SIM card. She insisted she knew nothing about Tai Chiang and his associates' current whereabouts. Sun Lin's testimony provided important links helping the task force better understand Tai Chiang's criminal network. Now, police knew the burning case didn't just involve Tai Chiang, but might also include participation from Jiang Bai and Dong Dong, Sun Lin's boyfriend. However, where they were remained a big question. Police returned to information about Tai Chiang. He was an only child, his mother died early, and his elderly father was suffering from a stroke and living alone in their hometown without anyone to care for him. Before the Alxa murder case occurred, Tai Chiang had brought his father to Baotu for convenient care, and the elderly man was living with Tai Chiang's in-laws. Additionally, Tai Chiang had a 3-year-old daughter. With a sick father and young child, police speculated that despite being on the run, Tai Chiang would certainly try to contact his family. This was precisely the weakness, the only thread that could pull him out of the shadows. Police decided to secretly monitor Tai Chiang's in-laws' family. Before long, their efforts were rewarded. Investigators discovered Tai Chiang and his associates were still renting an apartment in a Baotu residential area, just one wall away from his in-laws' house. This showed Tai Chiang's recklessness and overconfidence, thinking he could hide right under the police's noses and live close to his family. The task force immediately planned a capture operation. After many days of close surveillance, finding the right opportunity, police stormed the apartment. The first person captured was Jiang Bai. He was completely surprised and couldn't resist. Right after, Tai Chiang was also captured in a similar state. 2 of the 3 suspects from the Alxa case and the main suspects in the burning case were finally caught. After Tai Chiang and Jiang Bai were brought to the police station, investigators began interrogation. Both had endured over 6 months of fearful fugitive life since the Alxa case. The pressure, worry about an uncertain future, and exhaustion meant they couldn't remain silent forever. When faced with irrefutable evidence, Tai Chiang and Jiang Bai finally revealed a horrifying truth that shocked police. The murder victim was Wang Dong Dong, Sun Lin's boyfriend, and also their accomplice in the Alxa case. According to Tai Chiang and Jiang Bai's confessions, Dong Dong's death was by Tai Chiang's hand. In reality, the relationship among these 3 fugitives had been fractured for a long time. Tai Chiang recounted that in the Alxa murder case, he had only sat behind the wheel as the driver, not directly attacking the victim. This detail was later confirmed by police through investigation records of the Alxa case. Because of this, Tai Chiang always believed his guilt wasn't too severe. During the exhausting days of hiding, he had developed the intention to surrender, hoping for legal leniency and to end the underground life soon. What he desired most was to return to care for his sick elderly father and be with his young daughter. However, this intention immediately met fierce opposition from Dong Dong. Because Dong Dong was the one who had directly acted in the Alxa case, if caught, he would certainly face a much heavier sentence. He adamantly refused to surrender and wouldn't allow anyone in the group to be exposed. From here, the conflict between Tai Chiang and Dong Dong became increasingly tense, becoming the fuse for the subsequent tragedy. On the afternoon of August 26, 2012, Tai Chiang and Dong Dong sat drinking in the rental apartment. Alcohol made long, simmering contradictions flare up once again. The argument about surrendering became intense, and then Dong Dong suddenly demanded 100,000 yuan from Tai Chiang before standing up to leave. When Tai Chiang replied he had no money, Dong Dong immediately made a vicious threat. He would seek revenge by attacking Tai Chiang's wife, children, and sick elderly father. That threat was the last straw. In a rage of fury and feeling cornered, Dong Dong grabbed a knife while Tai Chiang quickly picked up a hammer. The chaotic struggle lasted only a few seconds, but determined everything. In blind anger, Ti Chang swung the hammer twice in succession at Dong Dong's head. The victim collapsed immediately and died on the spot, ending the argument with a tragic outcome that couldn't be undone. After Dong Dong died, Ti Chang and Jiang Bai sat silently in the living room for a long time. Both were shocked and regretful about what had happened. After a period of chaotic thinking, he decided he must cover up this incident at all costs. Tai Chiang knew clearly that he already had a criminal record and now had caused another murder case, certainly facing a very heavy sentence. In his mind was only one thought. He must hide this crime at all costs to avoid being caught and not implicate his family. Immediately after, Tai Chiang and Jiang Bai hastily planned the disposal. With experience from driving many times on the Beijing-Tibet highway, Ti Chang knew clearly that about 180 miles west of Baotou, there was a road crossing the Yellow River, an ideal location to sink the body and bury all evidence. That was their initial agreed plan. They prepared meticulously in panic, getting cotton blankets to wrap the body, using steel wire to tie it tightly, then borrowing Li Bing's Toyota sedan as transportation. Everything happened amid heavy breathing and fear, and by the time they left, it was nearly 3 a.m. Jiang Bai drove, the two fugitives racing along the highway hoping to reach the Yellow River before dawn. But when the car stopped at kilometer 793, exactly where the body was later discovered, it was nearly 5 a.m. The thin light of dawn appearing in the east made Tai Chiang realize they couldn't continue the journey without being discovered. The plan to sink the body collapsed midway, and in that moment, they were forced to make a new decision, hasty and full of risk. In a situation with no way back, Tai Chiang and Jiang Bai were forced to change their disposal plan immediately. They stopped at a gas station along the highway. Amid chaos and overwhelming fear, Tai Chiang had a desperate thought. Use gasoline from the car itself to burn the body right by the roadside. This place was desolate, empty of passers-by at dawn, and they believed the fire would erase all traces. In Tai Chiang's mind, hundreds of negative thoughts intertwined, suffocating reason and leaving only blind determination, hide the crime at any cost. After Dong Dong's body was consumed by flames, both quietly returned to the rental apartment. There they began meticulously erasing traces, wiping every corner, especially places that might have blood. The dark green paint layer on the floor that police discovered later was also part of the effort to hide the crime. However, Tai Chiang confessed an additional unexpected detail. The paint wasn't just to erase traces, but also an impulsive act of anger. Originally, their rental contract extended to October 2012, but after the murder, they wanted to return the house early and demanded back 1 month's rent. When refused by the landlord, Ti Chiang vented his fury by painting the entire floor green, considering it a final act of revenge. The deeper the interrogation went, the more police understood the tragedy Tai Chiang had created for himself. He once had a normal life, doing business, but wrong choices, falling into gambling and illegal activities had pushed him onto a criminal path. The Alxa case was just the beginning of a chain of subsequent tragedies. Pressure from fugitive life, exhaustion from living in fear, combined with family burdens, a sick elderly father and young children, made him long to end everything. However, instead of finding an opportunity to start over, he chose confrontation leading to a new murder, bringing even more severe consequences. Tai Chiang confessed that every time he lay down and closed his eyes, he thought about what had happened, about his wife and children, his elderly father. He was extremely regretful, but everything was too late. That regret haunted him every day, every hour. He had lost everything: freedom, family, and even conscience. Jiang Bai, accomplice in both cases, also had a similar fate. He had chosen to follow the wrong path and now had to pay a heavy price for his actions. The fugitive life not only made him lose freedom, but also forced him to live in constant fear and haunting nightmares. Dong Dong, the man who died at Ti Chiang's hands, also had a past full of mistakes. He was the one who directly caused the Alxa murder case, and his uncooperative attitude and vicious threats against Tai Chiang ultimately led to his own tragic death. police discovered that during Tai Chiang's fugitive period, lacking money, he had contacted his wife and brother-in-law asking for money. Providing money to a fleeing criminal made Tai Chiang's wife and brother-in-law suspected of harboring a criminal, and they were also temporarily detained for investigation. Even Sun Lin, Dong Dong's girlfriend, who initially tried to separate herself from this group, couldn't avoid implication. Her use of a fake ID card to rent housing for Tai Chiang's group during their fugitive period resulted in her temporary detention for harboring criminals. Though she had tried to rebuild her life in Wuhai, the past and mistakes in her relationship with Dong Dong ultimately dragged her into legal trouble. Finally, Tie Chiang and Jiang Bai received death sentences. The remaining related persons also faced appropriate sentences for their actions. The case of Tie Chiang, Dong Dong, and Jiang Bai was not just a brutal crime that shocked public opinion, but also a haunting warning about the consequences of wrong choices. Just because of falling into gambling, violence, and hatred, people who once had normal lives pushed themselves onto a path with no escape. Dong Dong's death, the capture of Tie Chiang and Jiang Bai, and the consequences their families had to bear are clear proof that crime can never be erased by concealment. Be brave enough to face your mistakes, seek help from trustworthy people, and follow the law. Only then can we find peace of mind and shield our loved ones from pain. That lesson closes a bloody chapter, but the journey to uncover the crime has not stopped. Because right after that, another case with equally tragic and shocking details is waiting for us to discover.